What if the grand histories of Africa's ancient kingdoms were not lost to time? What if the legacies of Nubian pharaohs, the wealth of Mansa Musa, and the mysteries of Great Zimbabwe were not just stories in books, but a living code embedded within you? Could your own DNA hold the key to unlocking the secrets of these powerful civilizations, proving that their epic story is far from over and continues through you? In the vast, sun-scorched landscapes where the Nile River carves its life-giving path through the deserts of modern Sudan and southern Egypt, lies the cradle of one of Africa's most formidable and enduring civilizations, the Kingdom of Kush. For millennia, this Nubian powerhouse was both a rival and a cultural partner to its northern neighbor, ancient Egypt, creating a complex tapestry of conquest, trade, and shared traditions. The story of Kush, with its capitals at Kerma, Napata, and Meroe, is etched in the ruins of pyramids, temples, and palaces that dot the riverbanks, a testament to its wealth, power, and sophisticated society. For centuries, this history was pieced together through archaeology and the often biased records of Egyptian scribes. However, a revolutionary new chapter is being written not in stone or papyrus, but within the very DNA of the people who walk these lands today. The astonishing field of population genetics is unveiling the profound and unbroken biological thread connecting modern Nubians, Sudanese, and even some southern Egyptians directly to the pharaohs, queens, warriors, and artisans of ancient Kush. This genetic echo, resonating through thousands of years, provides irrefutable evidence of a legacy that has survived the fall of empires, the shifting of sands, and the redrawing of maps. The genetic story begins with the unique location of Nubia, a natural corridor for human migration and a crossroads of African and Middle Eastern populations. Early genetic studies relying on mitochondrial DNA, which traces the maternal line, and Y-chromosome DNA, tracing the paternal line, began to reveal distinctive haplogroups prevalent in the region. These genetic markers acted like ancestral fingerprints, allowing scientists to trace lineages back in time. For instance, certain subclades of the Y-chromosomal haplogroup A and E, deeply rooted in Africa, are found in high frequencies among modern Nubian populations. When researchers managed to extract and analyze ancient DNA, ADNA, from remains found in Kushite burial sites, they discovered these same markers, creating a direct, tangible link between the past and present. The analysis of ADNA from sites like the necropolis at Meroe, the final capital of Kush, has been particularly revelatory. Meroe was a bustling metropolis famed for its unique script and its mastery of ironwork, which fueled its economy and military might for nearly 1,000 years. By sequencing genomes from individuals buried there, scientists have been able to construct a genetic profile of the Meroitic people. This profile shows a predominantly Northeast African ancestry, closely aligned with that of contemporary Nubians. The data confirms what oral traditions have long maintained, that the people living along the Nile in Sudan today are not newcomers but the direct descendants of those who built the Meroitic pyramids. Furthermore, the genetic narrative powerfully reframes the relationship between Kush and Egypt. Historically, Egypt often depicted Nubians as a foreign, subjugated people. Yet, genetics reveals a far more nuanced picture of continuous gene flow along the Nile. This biological exchange went both ways, intensifying during periods of political union, such as the 25th dynasty, when Kushite kings, the Black Pharaohs like Pi and Taharka, conquered and ruled all of Egypt. Ancient DNA from this period shows an increase in sub-Saharan African ancestry in Egyptian populations, a signature that persists, albeit diluted, in the genomes of modern Egyptians, especially in the south around Aswan. This genetic intermingling demonstrates that the Nile was not a rigid border but a fluid highway for people, ideas, and genes. The legacy of Kush is also found in markers of adaptation. The genomes of modern Nubians show signatures of selection for traits suited to their environment, such as adaptations to a diet rich in sorghum and millet, and genetic resilience to local pathogens like malaria. Tracing these adaptive genes back through ancient genomes helps paint a picture of the health and lifestyle of the ancient Kushites themselves. It allows us to understand not just who they were, but how they survived and thrived in a challenging desert environment. The power of this genetic revelation lies in its ability to restore a voice to the people of Kush, independent of Egyptian or Greco-Roman accounts. It shifts the historical focus from a narrative dominated by monumental architecture to one centered on the people themselves, their biological identity, and their enduring lineage. For the modern Nubian community, this scientific validation is profoundly significant. Amidst modern challenges, including displacement due to the construction of dams that have flooded ancestral lands, genetic science offers a powerful tool for cultural preservation and identity. It proves that while temples can be submerged and artifacts moved to museums, the truest legacy of the Kingdom of Kush is alive and well, encoded in the double helix of its descendants, a silent, unbreakable testament to one of Africa's greatest civilizations. High in the rugged plateaus of modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, the Kingdom of Axum emerged as a dominant force in the late 1st millennium BCE, its power and influence radiating far beyond the African continent. Architecturally symbolized by its towering monolithic obelisks or stelae, Axum was a pivotal hub in the intricate web of trade connecting the Roman Empire with the distant riches of India and the Far East. For centuries, its history was chronicled through its own Guizi script, coin inscriptions, and the accounts of foreign traders who marveled at its wealth. Today, however, a more intimate history of Axum is being uncovered through the lens of genetics, revealing a cosmopolitan society whose legacy is imprinted in the DNA of millions across the Horn of Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and beyond. This genetic narrative provides startling new evidence of the kingdom's global reach, showing how trade, migration, and diplomacy forged a unique biological heritage that endures to this day. The story of Axum's genetic legacy is inextricably linked to its strategic location at the crossroads of Africa and Eurasia. Situated with access to the Red Sea via its major port, Adulis, Axum controlled one of the most important trade arteries of the ancient world. This geographic advantage fostered a multicultural society, and the genetic data from modern populations in the region serves as a living map of these ancient interactions. Analysis of Y-chromosomal and mitochondrial DNA in contemporary Ethiopians and Eritreans reveals a complex and ancient genetic tapestry. The dominant paternal lineage is haplogroup E1b1b, which is deeply rooted in the Horn of Africa, establishing a strong indigenous foundation for the population. However, layered upon this indigenous substratum are significant contributions from the Near East and the Arabian Peninsula, most notably haplogroup J. The presence and high frequency of this haplogroup have long been interpreted as evidence of migration from southern Arabia, possibly linked to the legendary accounts of the Queen of Sheba and the Sabaean Kingdom. Recent, more sophisticated genomic analysis, including autosomal DNA, which provides a comprehensive picture of a person's entire ancestry, has refined this narrative. It suggests that the gene flow between the Horn of Africa and Arabia was not a single event but a long, continuous process stretching back thousands of years, predating Axum but intensifying dramatically during its zenith. This was not a simple case of migration in one direction, but a dynamic, bidirectional exchange of peoples and genes, facilitated by the maritime trade that was the lifeblood of the Aksumite economy. The port of Adulis was a vibrant melting pot where Aksumite merchants mingled with traders from Egypt, Rome, Persia, and India. This interaction is not just a matter of historical record. It left a discernible genetic footprint. Subtle genetic signatures from Southern Europe and South Asia can be detected in the genomes of people from the Tigray region of Ethiopia, the historical heartland of Axum. These markers, though present in small percentages, are powerful indicators of the long-distance connections that the kingdom maintained. They speak of foreign merchants who may have settled in Axum, married into local families, and contributed their DNA to the Aksumite gene pool, enriching its diversity. The conversion of King Izana to Christianity in the 4th century CE further solidified Aksum's connections with the Eastern Roman, Byzantine Empire and the wider Christian world, particularly with the Coptic Church in Alexandria, Egypt. This religious and political alliance would have encouraged the movement of clerics, diplomats, and pilgrims, creating another avenue for genetic exchange between Northeast Africa and the Mediterranean. The genetic legacy of Axum, therefore, is one of profound admixture, a testament to its role as a global connector. The unique genetic profile of populations in the Horn of Africa, characterized by a blend of deep-rooted African lineages and significant Eurasian contributions, is a direct result of the kingdom's historical trajectory. This genetic fusion challenges simplistic modern racial or geographic categorizations, revealing a population forged in the crucible of ancient international commerce and cultural exchange. By studying the DNA of modern inhabitants, scientists are not merely tracing ancestry. They are reconstructing the social and demographic history of a powerful African kingdom that stood on equal footing with the great empires of its time. The bloodlines of the Aksumites, carried by their descendants, are a living archive of this glorious past, telling a story of a sophisticated, outward-looking civilization that truly bridged continents. In the heart of southern Africa, spread across a lush plateau between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers, stand the majestic and enigmatic stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe. For centuries, the origin of this massive city, with its towering granite walls, conical tower, and intricate enclosures built without mortar, was a subject of intense speculation and colonial mythmaking that sought to deny its indigenous African roots. European colonists, baffled by its scale and sophistication, attributed its construction to everyone from Phoenicians to the Queen of Sheba. However, archaeology has long since confirmed that Great Zimbabwe was the capital of a powerful African kingdom that flourished between the 11th and 15th centuries CE, built by the ancestors of the modern Shona people. Now, genetic science is adding an astonishing layer of detail to this narrative, providing irrefutable biological evidence that links the Shona directly to the architects of this incredible civilization. By tracing genetic markers back through time, researchers are not only cementing the indigenous origins of Great Zimbabwe but are also illuminating the broader story of the Bantu migrations, one of the most significant demographic movements in human history, which culminated in the rise of this mighty stone kingdom. The genetic key to understanding Great Zimbabwe lies within the broader context of the Bantu expansion. This millennia-long process saw Bantu-speaking peoples migrate from their ancestral homeland in West-Central Africa, near modern Cameroon and Nigeria, across most of sub-Saharan Africa. This was not a single, organized migration but a complex series of movements driven by agricultural innovation, population growth, and the mastery of iron technology. Genetic studies across the continent have mapped this expansion by tracking the distribution of specific Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, particularly the E1b1a paternal lineage, which is found in high frequencies among Bantu-speaking populations. The Shona people of modern Zimbabwe and Mozambique carry these characteristic Bantu genetic signatures in abundance. When scientists analyze the genomes of the Shona, they find a clear and direct ancestral link to the early Bantu-speaking farmers who began arriving in southern Africa around 2,000 years ago. Ancient DNA, carefully extracted from the few human remains discovered at Great Zimbabwe and surrounding sites, corroborates this link, showing the same genetic profile. This evidence acts as a final, definitive rebuttal to the colonial myths, proving that the civilization was a homegrown achievement of an indigenous African people. The rise of Great Zimbabwe itself appears to be linked to specific demographic and social developments that are also reflected in the genetic data. The kingdom's wealth was built on a combination of cattle pastoralism and, crucially, control over the regional gold trade. Gold mined from the surrounding hills was traded to Swahili merchants on the Indian Ocean coast, finding its way to Arabia, India, and even China. This economic boom would have fueled population growth and social stratification, allowing a powerful elite to emerge who could command the labor necessary to construct the monumental stone city. Genetic analysis of modern Shona populations reveals patterns consistent with such a history. Studies have shown a degree of genetic differentiation among various Shona subgroups, which may reflect the ancient political structures of the Great Zimbabwe state and its successor kingdoms, such as the Mutapa and Torwa states. Certain lineages may be more closely associated with a historical ruling class, while others represent the broader populace of farmers, miners, and artisans. Furthermore, genetic diversity patterns suggest a period of rapid population growth coinciding with the flourishing of the kingdom, a demographic explosion fueled by economic prosperity and agricultural success. The construction of Great Zimbabwe was not the work of a small band of people, but of a large, stable, and well-organized society, and the genetic data bears this out. The enduring legacy of this kingdom is not only architectural but biological. The Shona people, who constitute the majority of Zimbabwe's population today, are the living heirs of Great Zimbabwe. Their language, culture, and oral traditions preserve the memory of this golden age, and their DNA carries the tangible, physical inheritance of its builders. This genetic connection provides a powerful sense of continuity and identity, rooting the Shona people in a deep and illustrious history. It transforms the silent stone ruins from a mysterious artifact of a lost people into a proud symbol of ancestral achievement. By decoding the genetic legacy written in the bloodlines of the Shona, science is not just solving a historical puzzle. It is restoring a vital piece of Africa's heritage, proving that the spirit and the people of Great Zimbabwe never vanished, they simply endured. In the vast expanse of the West African Sahel, where the Niger River bends in a great arc, the Mossi Empire rose in the 13th century to become one of the largest and wealthiest empires in the world. Its fame, built on the foundations of unimaginable quantities of gold, spread far beyond Africa, placing its legendary capital and the fabled city of Timbuktu onto medieval European maps as a near-mythical land of riches. The story of its most famous ruler, Mansa Musa, whose 14th-century pilgrimage to Mecca distributed so much gold that it temporarily destabilized the economy of the Mediterranean, is a testament to the empire's immense power. While the empire's political structures eventually crumbled, its legacy was never truly lost. It persisted in the vibrant cultures, languages, and traditions of the Mande peoples who were its architects. Today, a new and powerful testament to Mali's enduring influence is emerging from genetic research. By analyzing the DNA of diverse West African populations, scientists are uncovering the genetic diaspora of the Mali Empire, tracing the migration and settlement patterns of its people. This genetic trail reveals how the empire's economic and political dominance facilitated a massive movement of genes across the Sahel and beyond, creating a complex human landscape that reflects the grandeur and reach of this golden civilization. The genetic heart of the Mali Empire lies with the Mande-speaking peoples, particularly the Malinke, or Mandinka, who formed the core of the empire under the founding hero, Sundiata Keita. Modern genetic surveys of these groups reveal a shared ancestry and specific genetic markers that distinguish them within the broader West African genetic landscape. However, the story becomes truly fascinating when scientists trace the diffusion of these Mande-associated genetic signatures across the region. The empire's economy was driven by the trans-Saharan trade, primarily in gold from the Bambuk and Bure goldfields in the south and salt from the Saharan mines like Tagaza in the north. This trade did not just move goods, it moved people. Mande merchants, known as the Daila, established trading colonies and diasporic communities in cities and towns hundreds, even thousands of miles from the Malian heartland. They settled in areas that are now part of modern-day Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Nigeria. As these merchants settled, they intermarried with local populations. This process is clearly visible in the genetic record. Modern populations in these areas often show a significant percentage of Mande-related ancestry, a genetic echo of these ancient commercial networks. For example, populations in northern Ghana and Ivory Coast, historically known for their role as intermediaries in the gold trade, carry genetic markers that link them directly back to the Malian heartland. This genetic admixture is a living map of the trade routes that made Mali rich. The empire's expansion was also driven by military conquest and political administration. As the Mansa extended his rule, he would install governors, garrisons of soldiers, and administrators in conquered territories. These individuals and their families brought their Mande genetic heritage with them, introducing it into new populations. This state-sponsored movement of people helped to both consolidate the empire's control and weave a common genetic thread through its diverse subject peoples. The spread of Islam, which was adopted by the Malian elite and facilitated by the trans-Saharan trade, also played a role in shaping the region's genetic makeup. The pilgrimage of Mansa Musa was not just an act of piety but a colossal logistical and demographic event, involving a caravan of an estimated 60,000 people. While many returned, some would have settled along the route in places like Egypt or the Arabian Peninsula, leaving a small but detectable genetic footprint. Conversely, the empire's fame and its centers of learning, like Timbuktu and Jen, attracted scholars, clerics, and traders from across the Islamic world. This influx of North African and Arab individuals, while numerically small, contributed to the genetic diversity of the urban elite, creating a cosmopolitan gene pool in the empire's major cities. This can be seen today in the presence of certain North African Y-chromosomal haplogroups among specific lineages in Malian populations who trace their ancestry to these scholarly or trading classes. Therefore, the genetic legacy of the Mali Empire is one of dynamic expansion and fusion. It is a story told not just in the epic poems of griots, but in the subtle variations of DNA across West Africa. The empire was not a monolithic entity but a vibrant, multi-ethnic state that fostered unprecedented interaction and mobility. This movement created a complex mosaic of interconnected populations, where the genetic legacy of the imperial core in Mali can be found scattered like flecks of gold across the vast territory it once dominated. For the descendants of this great empire, this genetic heritage provides a tangible connection to a shared glorious past, a time when their ancestors ruled from the Atlantic coast to the heart of the Sahara, and their king's name was whispered with awe in the courts of Europe and the markets of the Middle East. In the dense tropical rainforests of what is now southern Nigeria, the Kingdom of Benin emerged around the 12th century as a highly centralized and powerful state, renowned for its sophisticated political system centered on the divine king, the Oba. Its capital, Benin City, was a marvel of urban planning, enclosed by massive earthen walls and moats. Yet, the kingdom's most celebrated legacy is its extraordinary art, particularly the cast metal sculptures universally known as the Benin bronzes. These masterpieces of metallurgy, which also include works in ivory and wood, display a stunning naturalism and technical skill that astounded the world when they were first brought to Europe after the British punitive expedition of 1897. For decades, the history of these objects and the kingdom that produced them has been studied through art history and oral traditions. Now, genetics is offering a remarkable new perspective, suggesting that the kingdom's highly organized social structure, particularly its famous guild system for artists and craftsmen, may have created distinct artistic bloodlines. Researchers are exploring the tantalizing possibility that specific genetic lineages can be traced that correspond to the ancient families of artisans who held the exclusive hereditary rights to create the kingdom's sacred and royal art, embedding a story of artistic genius into the very DNA of their descendants, the Edo people. The foundation of this genetic inquiry lies in the unique social organization of the Benin Kingdom. The production of the famous bronze plaques, commemorative heads, and other ceremonial objects was not open to all. It was a sacred duty and a royal monopoly, strictly controlled by the Oba. The artisans, bronze casters, ivory carvers, weavers, and bead makers, were organized into highly specialized guilds. Membership in these guilds was hereditary, passed down from father to son through generations. This rigid, patrilineal system of craft specialization would have had profound genetic consequences. Over centuries, it would have limited the gene flow between the artisan guilds and the general population, effectively creating distinct, endogamous subgroups within the larger Edo society. Genetically, this would mean that the Y chromosomes of men within a specific guild, like the Bronze Casters Guild, Eigen Iranwan, would be expected to show significantly less diversity and share a more recent common ancestor compared to the broader Edo population. Modern genetic studies are beginning to test this hypothesis. By collecting DNA samples from descendants of these historic guilds, who still maintain their traditional identities and roles in Benin City today, researchers can compare their genetic makeup. Initial findings are intriguing. They are identifying specific Y-chromosomal haplogroups and even unique short tandem repeat (STR) signatures that are more prevalent within certain craft families than in the general Edo population. This suggests that these lineages have indeed remained relatively distinct for hundreds of years. It's a case of cultural practice directly shaping the genetic architecture of a population. This research allows us to peer into the social dynamics of the ancient kingdom. The genetic distinctiveness of the artisan lineages underscores their high status and specialized role in Benin society. They were not merely laborers but were considered essential to the spiritual and political well-being of the kingdom, as their work was integral to rituals that honored ancestors and legitimized the Oba's rule. This elevated status, reinforced by royal patronage, would have encouraged the maintenance of these separate, hereditary lines. Beyond the Y chromosome, analysis of mitochondrial DNA, tracing maternal lines, and autosomal DNA can reveal even more. For instance, while the paternal line within a guild might be very consistent, the maternal lines could show more diversity, indicating that while sons inherited their father's craft, men from the guilds may have married women from outside their immediate community. This provides a more nuanced picture of marriage patterns and social interactions in the kingdom. The implications of this genetic quest are profound. It transforms the Benin bronzes from static museum pieces into dynamic links to living people. An intricately cast bronze head of an Oba is no longer just an anonymous masterpiece. It can be seen as the product of a specific lineage, a family whose descendants may still walk the streets of Benin City, carrying the genetic inheritance of the very artist who created it centuries ago. This provides an incredibly powerful connection to the past for the Edo people, validating their oral histories and cultural traditions with cutting-edge science. It demonstrates that the genius of Benin was not an abstract historical phenomenon but a tangible, biological inheritance, passed down through the generations and preserved not only in bronze and ivory but in the bloodlines of the kingdom's descendants. This fusion of art history and population genetics is forging a new way of understanding the deep past, where a person's DNA can be as much a part of their cultural heritage as the language they speak or the art they create. Along the sun-drenched eastern coast of Africa, from Somalia in the north to Mozambique in the south, a unique and vibrant civilization blossomed for over 1,000 years. This was the world of the Swahili Coast, a string of independent city-states like Kilwa, Mombasa, Lamu, and Zanzibar, which grew fabulously wealthy by acting as the middlemen in a vast Indian Ocean trade network. Connected by the predictable monsoon winds, their iconic dhow sailing vessels linked the African interior with Arabia, Persia, India, and even China. The result was a cosmopolitan culture, famously syncretic in its art, architecture, language, and religion. For a long time, the origins of the Swahili people themselves were debated, with some early 20th century scholars incorrectly portraying them as Arab or Persian colonists rather than indigenous Africans. While archaeology and linguistics have long since corrected this view, establishing the Swahili culture's deep Bantu African roots, it is the field of genetics that is now painting the most detailed and astonishing picture of their heritage. DNA analysis of modern Swahili populations reveals a story of a true genetic melting pot, a complex and layered admixture that perfectly mirrors their history. It provides irrefutable evidence of centuries of interaction, intermarriage, and integration between Bantu-speaking Africans and seafaring peoples from across the Indian Ocean, creating a unique genetic identity that is a living testament to the coast's history as a global crossroads. The genetic foundation of the Swahili people is unequivocally African. Analysis of mitochondrial DNA (mtDNA), which is inherited through the maternal line, shows that the vast majority of Swahili lineages belong to sub-Saharan African haplogroups, primarily those common among Bantu-speaking peoples, such as haplogroup L. This indicates that the founding populations of the coastal settlements were overwhelmingly African women. This genetic data aligns perfectly with the archaeological evidence, which shows that the earliest settlements along the coast were established by Bantu-speaking farmers and fishers who were expanding into the region. It was upon this indigenous African demographic and cultural bedrock that the Swahili civilization was built. However, the story told by the paternal lineages, traced through the Y chromosome, is dramatically different and reveals the cosmopolitan nature of Swahili society. A significant percentage of Swahili men carry Y chromosomal haplogroups that are typical of the Middle East, such as haplogroup J, and South Asia, haplogroups H, R, and L. This striking pattern of African maternal ancestry and a mix of African and Eurasian paternal ancestry tells a clear social story. It points to a history where male traders, primarily from Arabia, Persia, and India, arrived on the coast, settled, and married local African women. This process was not a colonial imposition but a long-term pattern of integration. These foreign merchants were assimilated into the local society, adopting the language, which became Kiswahili, a Bantu language with significant Arabic loanwords, and many cultural norms, while also contributing their own traditions, religion, Islam, and crucially their genes. The term Shirazi, used by some Swahili families to claim descent from Persian traders from Shiraz, was once dismissed by some historians as mere legend. Yet, genetics has provided a fascinating corroboration. While the specific link to Shiraz is hard to prove definitively for all, the presence of Persian-associated genetic markers among these groups confirms a genuine biological connection to the region, suggesting these oral traditions are rooted in historical reality. More recent and advanced analyses of autosomal DNA, which surveys the entire genome, have allowed for an even more nuanced understanding of this admixture. Scientists can now estimate the timing and proportions of these genetic contributions. These studies suggest that the major period of admixture between African and Asian populations occurred between the 8th and 16th centuries, perfectly coinciding with the golden age of the Swahili city-states. The analysis reveals that an average Swahili individual's ancestry is a composite, drawing primarily from Bantu-speaking African ancestors, but with a substantial contribution from populations across the Indian Ocean basin. This genetic fusion is the very definition of the Swahili identity, challenges modern, rigid notions of race and nationality. The Swahili people are not simply African or Arab or Persian. They are Swahili, a distinct identity forged in the crucible of maritime trade and cultural exchange. Their DNA is a literal embodiment of the history of the Indian Ocean world, a rich tapestry woven from threads that reach from the heart of Africa to the shores of the Arabian Gulf, Persia, and the Indian subcontinent. It is a powerful biological narrative of connection and synthesis, proving that for centuries, the Swahili Coast was not a periphery, but a vibrant center of a connected global community. Deep within the formidable and seemingly lifeless expanse of the Central Sahara, in a region now part of southwestern Libya known as the Fezzan, a remarkable and often overlooked kingdom once thrived. This was the civilization of the Garamantes, who flourished from approximately 500 BCE to 700 CE. Roman historians like Herodotus and Pliny the Elder wrote of them as desert-dwelling troglodytes and fierce warriors who drove four-horse chariots. For a long time, these accounts, combined with the harshness of the environment, led to the perception of the Garamantes as little more than nomadic raiders. However, modern archaeology has completely overturned this view, revealing a sophisticated, urbanized society that engineered a brilliant solution to survive in one of the world's most arid environments. They constructed an extensive underground network of tunnels, known as fogaras, to tap into fossil water aquifers and irrigate their fields, allowing them to build a powerful state based on agriculture and control of the nascent trans-Saharan trade. While their cities have long been reclaimed by the sand, the legacy of the Garamantes endures in a surprising place. The DNA of modern Saharan peoples, particularly the Tuareg and other Berber-speaking groups. Genetic research is now tracing a direct ancestral line from these contemporary desert dwellers back to the ancient kingdom, revealing how the Garamantes not only engineered their landscape, but also left a lasting biological imprint on the human population of the Sahara. The genetic investigation into the Garamantes begins with understanding the broader genetic landscape of North Africa, which is characterized by the predominance of the E1b1b, specifically, the EM81 subclade, Y-chromosomal haplogroup, often referred to as the Berber marker. This lineage has a deep history in the region, dating back thousands of years. The Garamantes, as an indigenous Saharan civilization, would have undoubtedly carried this marker. The key question for geneticists was whether they could find a specific, more localized signature of the Garamantian population and see if it persists today. The answer lies in the unique history of the Sahara itself. The desert has acted as both a barrier and a corridor, leading to periods of genetic isolation and exchange. The Garamantes existed during a period when the Sahara was already hyper-arid. Their survival depended on their technological innovation, the fogaras. This system allowed for a demographic anomaly. A large, sedentary population in the middle of the desert. This population would have developed a relatively distinct gene pool due to its geographic isolation. When scientists analyze the genomes of modern Tuareg populations, who inhabit the same regions as the ancient Garamantes, they find compelling evidence of this legacy. The Tuareg people exhibit the characteristic North African EM81 marker, but often with specific variations and in combination with certain mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, like U6, that suggest a long-term in situ evolution within the Sahara. Their genetic makeup shows a deep-rooted ancestry in the region, with less of the more recent admixture from sub-Saharan Africa or the Arab migrations that is seen in populations along the Saharan fringe. This points to a direct descent from the ancient Saharan peoples, with the Garamantes being their most prominent and socially complex ancestors in this specific region. Furthermore, studies of ancient DNA, ADNA, though challenging to obtain from the hot, dry conditions of the Fezzan, have begun to corroborate these findings. Analysis of remains from Garamantian burial sites has yielded genetic profiles that closely match those of modern Tuareg, creating a temporal bridge between the ancient kingdom and today's inhabitants. This genetic continuity is remarkable, suggesting that despite the collapse of their kingdom, likely due to the eventual exhaustion of the fossil water supplies that sustained their agriculture, the Garamantian people themselves did not simply vanish. Instead, they adapted. As their centralized urban society became untenable, They likely transitioned back to a more nomadic or semi-nomadic pastoralist lifestyle, a mode of existence better suited to a deteriorating environment. They became, in essence, the ancestors of the Tuareg. This genetic story completely reframes our understanding of Saharan history. It demonstrates that the Tuareg are not simply timeless nomads, but are the heirs of a great, settled civilization who were forced to adapt to dramatic climate change. Their deep knowledge of the desert, their social structures, and their very biology were shaped by this history. The legacy of the Garamantes is therefore not just in the ghostly outlines of their buried cities and the crumbling remains of their fagaras, but in the resilient people who still call the Sahara home. Their DNA is a living archive of a forgotten kingdom, telling a powerful tale of innovation, survival, and adaptation in the face of profound environmental challenges. In the heart of central Nigeria, on the Jos Plateau, a chance discovery during a tin mining operation in 1943 unearthed one of Africa's most enigmatic and foundational cultures. A terracotta head, crafted with a startlingly unique artistic style, characterized by triangular eyes, perforated pupils, and elaborate hairstyles, was the first evidence of the Nok culture, which flourished from as early as 1500 BCE to around 500 CE. Subsequent archaeological work has uncovered hundreds of similar terracotta sculptures, along with evidence of some of the earliest iron smelting in sub-Saharan Africa. The Nok people were not empire builders in the mold of Mali or Axum. They did not leave behind monumental stone cities or written records. Yet, their cultural and technological innovations laid a crucial foundation for the subsequent development of West African civilizations. For a long time, the identity of the Nok people and what became of them was a complete mystery. Now, through the powerful lens of genetics, researchers are beginning to trace the deep roots of this ancient culture, suggesting that their biological legacy is far from lost. Instead, it appears to be widely dispersed, woven into the genetic fabric of many modern West African populations, providing a crucial ancestral link that helps explain the region's complex demographic history. Unraveling the genetic legacy of the Nok is challenging because they were not a single, monolithic kingdom but a collection of communities sharing a distinct material culture over a vast area. Furthermore, the acidic soil of the region is not conducive to the preservation of ancient human remains, making the recovery of ancient DNA, ADNA, from Nok sites exceedingly rare. Consequently, geneticists have adopted an inferential approach, studying the DNA of modern populations living in and around the historical Nok territory and looking for patterns of ancestry and divergence that could point back to a common foundational population. This research is deeply intertwined with the linguistic story of the region, particularly the origin and spread of the Benue-Congo language family, which includes the vast Bantu language group. The Nok heartland is situated in a linguistically diverse area that is considered to be close to the ancestral homeland of these languages. Some scholars have hypothesized that the Nok people may have been among the early speakers of a Proto-Bantu or related Benue-Congo language. The technological advancements of the Nok, sophisticated agriculture combined with iron production, would have provided a significant demographic advantage, enabling population growth and expansion. This model suggests that the descendants of the Nok culture were part of the Great Bantu Migrations that populated much of Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa. Genetic evidence from across the continent supports this broad narrative. The prevalence of the E1b1a Y chromosome haplogroup, and various L-series mitochondrial DNA haplogroups among Bantu speakers forms a genetic trail leading back to West Central Africa. The Nok people would represent a key ancestral node in this massive human dispersal. When scientists analyze the genomes of modern ethnic groups in central Nigeria, such as the Ham, Jaba, Ham, and Gbagyi peoples who live in the area where Nok artifacts are most commonly found, they discover deep ancestral lineages. These populations exhibit a high degree of genetic diversity, indicative of a long history of settlement in the region. By comparing their genomes with those of other West African populations and with groups further south along the Bantu migration routes, researchers can build a genetic family tree. This tree often shows that the populations in the former Nok territory occupy a basal position, meaning they are genetically closer to the root of these subsequent expansions. In essence, while it is impossible to say any single modern group is the Nok, many groups in central Nigeria almost certainly carry a significant proportion of their ancestry directly from them. The Nok legacy, therefore, is not that of a single continuous line of descent, but of a foundational source population whose genes have been passed down and spread across countless new communities. The Nok can be seen as a crucial part of the ancestral trunk from which many branches of the West African family tree grew. Their innovations in technology and agriculture likely fueled a Nok-era population boom, and the descendants of this expansion went on to become the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Bantu peoples, and many others. Their genetic influence is subtle but pervasive, a deep ancestral layer underlying the more recent histories of migration, empire building, and ethnic formation. The terracotta heads, with their serene and mysterious expressions, are the most visible legacy of the Nok. But genetics reveals their truer living legacy, a foundational gene pool that contributed to the peopling of a vast portion of the African continent. The blood of the Nok still flows in the veins of millions, a silent testament to the enduring impact of this ancient and pivotal West African culture. On the banks of the mighty Congo River in West Central Africa, the Kingdom of Congo arose in the late 14th century, becoming one of the most powerful and highly developed states in the region. With its capital at Mbanza, Congo, and its sophisticated political structure led by the king, the Mana Congo, the kingdom controlled a vast territory encompassing parts of modern-day Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Republic of the Congo. The Congo people developed complex social systems, extensive trade networks, and a unique spiritual cosmology. Their history took a dramatic and tragic turn with the arrival of the Portuguese in the late 15th century. Initially, relations were based on mutual respect and trade, with the Congo nobility even adopting Christianity and Portuguese names. However, this encounter soon became dominated by the insatiable European demand for enslaved labor for their burgeoning American colonies. Over the next 4 centuries, the Kingdom of Congo became one of the single largest sources of captives for the transatlantic slave trade. This horrific chapter of history scattered the people of the Congo across the Americas. While the kingdom itself eventually collapsed under internal pressures and the relentless devastation of the slave trade, its legacy was not erased. It survived in the cultural, linguistic, and spiritual practices of the African diaspora. Now, genetics is providing a powerful and deeply personal tool to reconnect the descendants of the enslaved with their Congo ancestry, tracing specific DNA markers from the Americas back to Central Africa, and revealing the profound and enduring biological footprint of this great African kingdom. The genetic quest to trace the Congo legacy begins with the grim data of the slave trade itself. Shipping manifests and historical records, though often incomplete, show that a staggering number of Africans, well over 1 million, were forcibly taken from the ports of the Congo and neighboring regions like Longo and Angola. This created a massive forced genetic transfer from Central Africa to Brazil, the Caribbean and North America. Today, the results of this are clearly visible in the genomes of people of African descent throughout the Americas. Consumer genetic ancestry testing has made millions of people aware of their African heritage, and for many, the results point overwhelmingly to Central Africa. When DNA analysis identifies ancestry from the Congo and southern Bantu peoples region, it is directly pointing to the historical sphere of influence of the Congo Kingdom and its neighbors. Scientists conducting population genetics research can go even further. By comparing the genomes of African-descended populations in the Americas with a fine-scale reference panel of genomes from various African ethnic groups, they can identify specific ancestral links with remarkable precision. These studies consistently show a strong and widespread genetic signal from the historical Congo region. For example, the genetic makeup of Afro-Brazilians, particularly in areas like Bahia where the sugar plantations demanded immense labor, shows a very high proportion of ancestry from this part of Africa. Similarly, in the Caribbean communities in Cuba and Haiti, and the Gullah Geechee people of the coastal United States, all show significant genetic ties to the Congo. These genetic links are more than just statistics. They represent millions of individual family stories, shattered by slavery but now partially reconnected through DNA. For an individual in the Americas who discovers a strong genetic match to populations in modern Angola or Congo, it provides a tangible link to a specific place and a deep history that was systematically erased by the institution of slavery. It allows them to look beyond the brutal anonymity of being enslaved and connect with a pre-colonial identity rooted in one of Africa's great kingdoms. The genetic evidence also enriches our understanding of the cultural survivals, known as Africanisms, that are so prominent in the diaspora. The spiritual traditions of Candomblé in Brazil, Palo Mayombe in Cuba, and Hoodoo in the United States all contain clear linguistic and cosmological elements from the Congo Kingdom. The genetic confirmation that the people who practice these traditions often carry Congo DNA solidifies the understanding that these were not just abstract cultural borrowings, but were living traditions carried and preserved by the Congo people themselves. The genetic legacy of the Congo is therefore a story of profound tragedy, but also of incredible resilience. It is a dual narrative. On one hand, it quantifies the scale of the demographic catastrophe inflicted upon Central Africa. On the other, it stands as a powerful testament to the survival of the Congo people and their descendants. Their kingdom may have fallen, but its people, scattered across a new world, endured. Their DNA, now spread across continents, is an indelible record of their journey and a permanent biological link to the great civilization their ancestors built along the banks of the Congo River. Long before the famed Mansa Musa of Mali captured the world's imagination, another formidable empire rose in the Sahel of West Africa, laying the groundwork for the region's subsequent golden ages. This was the Ghana Empire, known to its own people as Ouagadougou, which flourished from approximately the 8th to the 13th centuries. Located in what is now southeastern Mauritania and western Mali, Ghana was the first of the great West African trading empires, and its power was built upon one single, immensely valuable commodity: gold. The empire's kings were said to possess legendary wealth, controlling the trade routes that funneled gold from the fields of bambuk to the south and exchanging it for salt, cloth, and other goods brought by Berber and Arab merchants across the Sahara. Though its capital, Kumbisala, now lies in ruins and the empire itself was eventually eclipsed by Mali, the legacy of Ghana was foundational. It established the political and economic systems that its successors would inherit and expand upon. While historical sources like the accounts of Arab geographer al-Bakri provide a glimpse into its power, genetics is now adding a new biological dimension to its story. By studying the DNA of the Songhai people, the direct descendants of the empire's founders, and tracing their genetic influence, scientists are uncovering the deep demographic impact of West Africa's first gold kings. The Songhai people are the undisputed ethnic and cultural heirs of the Ghana Empire. Their oral traditions, meticulously preserved by griots, recount the history of Ouagadougou and its legendary rulers. Modern genetic analysis provides a powerful scientific corroboration of these traditions. When the genomes of the Songhai are studied, they reveal a distinct genetic profile within the broader Mande-speaking family. They represent a deep-rooted lineage in the Sahel, one that has occupied the region for millennia. This genetic signature acts as a baseline, a reference point for the people who built the ancient empire. From this baseline, researchers can then trace the diaspora and influence of the Songhai, which was driven by the empire's fortunes. The wealth generated by the gold trade would have spurred significant population growth among the Songhai, creating demographic pressure and opportunities for expansion. As the empire grew, Songhai administrators, soldiers, and merchants would have moved into new territories, establishing settlements and integrating with local populations. This expansion is visible in the genetic landscape of the region today. Neighboring ethnic groups, such as the Malinke, who would later found the Mali Empire, and various groups in Senegal and Gambia, show clear evidence of genetic admixture with the Songhai. This indicates that the rise of Ghana was not just a political event but a demographic one, which facilitated the spread of Songhai genes across a wide swath of the West African Sahel. The decline and fall of the Ghana Empire, often attributed to the invasion of the Almoravids from the north in the 11th century and the depletion of its resources, also triggered a significant demographic shift. The collapse of the central state led to the dispersal of Songhai communities. This event, known in their oral traditions as the Songhai diaspora, saw large groups migrate away from their arid heartland in search of new opportunities. They moved south and west, founding new towns and commercial centers and playing a pivotal role in the politics and trade of the successor states, especially the Mali Empire. Genetics can trace this diaspora. Pockets of Songhai-related ancestry can be found in communities far from their original homeland. These genetic footprints serve as a map of their migrations, confirming the historical accounts of their dispersal and their role as cultural and economic innovators throughout the region. For instance, the famous Diala merchant clans, who were instrumental in the trade networks of the Mali and Songhai empires, often trace their origins back to Songhai ancestors. Genetic data supports these claims, showing a shared paternal lineage that connects these geographically dispersed merchant families back to the Songhai heartland. Therefore, the genetic legacy of the Ghana Empire is foundational. It represents the ancestral stock from which later West African powers drew their populations and expertise. The empire created a demographic and economic center of gravity that shaped the human landscape for centuries to come. While its political structure vanished, its people did not. They adapted, migrated, and integrated, carrying their genetic and cultural heritage with them. The DNA of the Songhai and their neighbors is a living chronicle of this first great Sahelian empire, proving that the influence of Ghana's gold kings was not just written in the ledgers of Arab traders, but was permanently encoded into the genomes of the people of West Africa. At its zenith in the 16th century, the Songhai Empire was the largest and most powerful state in West Africa's history, its dominion stretching over 1,000 miles along the life-giving arc of the Niger River. Rising from the ashes of the declining Mali Empire Songhai, under the leadership of brilliant military strategists like Sunni Ali and the devout Muslim reformer Askia the Great, forged an empire that was not only a military powerhouse but also a celebrated center of Islamic scholarship and commerce. Its legendary cities, the capital Gao, the commercial hub of Jen, and above all, the scholarly sanctuary of Timbuktu, became beacons of learning, attracting students, poets, jurists, and theologians from across Africa and the Middle East. This intellectual and cultural efflorescence created a uniquely cosmopolitan society, a vibrant mix of peoples drawn together by faith, trade, and the pursuit of knowledge. While the empire was shattered by a Moroccan invasion in 1591, its profound legacy was not extinguished. It endured in the rich intellectual traditions of the region and, as modern genetics is now revealing, in the complex DNA of the peoples who live along the Niger Bend today. The genetic story of the Songhai Empire is a tale of convergence and synthesis, a biological reflection of the diverse human streams that fed the river of its civilization, leaving a scholarly and commercial inheritance encoded in the genomes of its descendants. The ethnic core of the empire was the Songhai people, who today primarily inhabit the regions of modern Mali and Niger. Genetic studies of the Songhai show a profile deeply rooted in the West African Sahel, sharing a common ancestry with other Nilo-Saharan and Niger-Congo-speaking groups. However, what makes their genetic makeup, and that of other peoples within the former empire's territory, so fascinating is the intricate layering of influences from other populations. The empire's wealth, like that of its predecessors Ghana and Mali, was derived from the trans-Saharan trade. This ancient network brought Tuareg and Berber caravanners from the north, who controlled the salt mines of the Sahara, into regular contact with the agricultural and gold-producing communities of the south. This interaction, spanning centuries, was not solely economic. It was also genetic. The genomes of modern Songhai, Fulani, and Tuareg populations in the region show clear evidence of bidirectional gene flow. Paternal lineages common in North Africa, like haplogroup EM81, are found in the Sahel, while maternal lineages of sub-Saharan origin, various L haplogroups, are present in Saharan populations, painting a picture of continuous intermarriage and integration along these commercial arteries. The reign of Askia the Great amplified this cosmopolitanism. His pilgrimage to Mecca was a major geopolitical event, and upon his return, he actively recruited scholars from Egypt and Morocco to settle in Timbuktu and Gao. He established Islam as the state religion and fostered an environment where Islamic law, science, and literature flourished. The University of Sankore in Timbuktu became a world-renowned institution with tens of thousands of students. This intellectual migration, though likely involving a smaller number of people than the commercial migrations, had a significant genetic and cultural impact on the urban elite. Certain families in Timbuktu today, known as the Alpha or scholarly clans, trace their ancestry directly to these foreign scholars. Genetic analysis of these lineages often supports their oral histories, revealing Y-chromosomal haplogroups, such as J1, that are more common in the Arabian Peninsula and the Maghreb. This provides a tangible biological link to the intellectual golden age of the empire, showing how scholarly prestige became intertwined with specific ancestral lines. Furthermore, the empire was multi-ethnic by its very nature, encompassing a vast array of subject peoples, including the ancestors of the modern Bambara, Bozo, Dogon, and Fulani. The imperial structure, with its professional army, centralized bureaucracy, and riverine navy, facilitated the movement of people across this vast domain. Soldiers, administrators, and farmers moved to new regions, leading to a gradual but steady mixing of these diverse groups. The result is a complex genetic gradient along the Niger River, where neighboring populations are closely related but still retain marks of their distinct ancestral origins. The DNA of the people of the Niger Bend is a living library, holding the history of the Songhai Empire. It tells a story not of a single monolithic people, but of a dynamic and integrated society where Songhai warriors, Tuareg nomads, Fulani pastoralists, Mande merchants, and Arab scholars came together to create one of history's great civilizations. The empire's collapse led to political fragmentation, but the genetic and cultural connections it forged were permanent. The scholarly inheritance of Songhai is not just in the thousands of priceless manuscripts still preserved in Timbuktu's libraries. It is also carried within the very cells of the people whose ancestors built that remarkable world. Nestled in the heart of the West African Sahel, on the semi-arid plateau of the Volta River Basin, the Mossi Kingdoms emerged around the 15th century and forged a history remarkable for its extraordinary stability and resilience. Unlike the vast, expansionist empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai that rose and fell on the trade routes to their north, the Mossi states, most notably the powerful kingdoms of Ouagadougou, Yatenga, and Tenkadogo, were characterized by their endurance. For over 500 years, they successfully resisted absorption by their larger, wealthier neighbors, developing a unique and highly structured society built around a sacred king, the Mogo Naba, a powerful cavalry, and a deeply entrenched aristocratic system. This history of political independence and cultural continuity, maintained in the face of constant external pressure, has created a fascinating case study for population geneticists. The Mossi people of modern-day Burkina Faso, who are the direct descendants of these ancient kingdoms, possess a genetic profile that reflects their unique historical trajectory. Their DNA tells a story not of widespread conquest and admixture, but of demographic consolidation and resilience, revealing how a distinct cultural and political identity can shape the very biological makeup of a people over centuries. The origins of the Mossi Kingdoms are recounted in a famous oral tradition that tells of a warrior princess named Yanenga, who married an elephant hunter and whose son, Awa Drogo, founded the Mossi dynasty. This foundational myth speaks to a history of migration and fusion, likely representing the arrival of a small, militarily organized group that imposed its rule upon the existing agricultural communities of the Voltaic region. This founder effect is a key concept in understanding Mossi genetics. A founder effect occurs when a new population is established by a small number of individuals, whose gene pool may differ by chance from the source population. The result is that the new population can have a distinct genetic makeup. Genetic studies of the Mossi people lend credence to this model. Analysis of their Y chromosomes reveals a high frequency of certain haplogroups that are less common in the surrounding Monde and Songhai-speaking populations. This suggests that the paternal lineages of the founding Mossi aristocracy were relatively distinct and have been passed down through the generations, maintained by a social system that emphasized hereditary rule. This genetic distinctiveness was reinforced by the kingdom's political and military posture. The Mossi were renowned for their formidable cavalry, which allowed them to effectively defend their territory against the much larger infantry-based armies of Mali and Songhai. Their raids on key trading cities like Timbuktu are well documented in historical chronicles. This military success allowed them to remain politically independent, which in turn limited the amount of large-scale genetic influx from these neighboring empires. While there was undoubtedly some level of intermarriage and local gene flow, the Mossi states did not experience the kind of wholesale demographic mixing that characterized the more cosmopolitan centers of the Niger Bend. Their society was more inward-looking, focused on agricultural production and the preservation of its unique social hierarchy. This relative isolation helped preserve their distinct genetic signature. Autosomal DNA analysis, which provides a comprehensive overview of ancestry, confirms this pattern. While the Mossi are clearly part of the broader West African genetic landscape, they form their own distinct cluster in genetic analyses, differentiating them from their neighbors. The level of genetic diversity within the Mossi is also informative. It is consistent with a population that grew steadily over a long period from a relatively small founding group, rather than one formed by the recent merger of several large, disparate populations. The story told by Mossi DNA is therefore one of endurance. It reflects a society that prioritized stability over expansion and cultural preservation over cosmopolitanism. Their resilience was not just political, it was demographic and, by extension, genetic. The highly organized social structure, which has persisted in ceremonial form to this day, acted as a container, shaping and preserving the biological heritage of the Mossi people. For the Mossi themselves, this genetic continuity is a source of immense pride, a scientific affirmation of their long and unbroken history. It demonstrates that the strength of a civilization is not always measured by the size of its empire or the quantity of its gold, but sometimes by its capacity to endure, to maintain its identity, and to pass its unique legacy, both cultural and biological, intact through the generations. In the annals of ancient Egypt, there exists a tantalizing and mysterious land known as Punt, the land of the gods. For over 1,000 years from the Old Kingdom to the New Kingdom, the pharaohs dispatched ambitious expeditions to this fabled realm, returning with shiploads of exotic treasures: myrrh, frankincense, ebony, ivory, gold, and live animals. The most famous of these missions, meticulously documented in reliefs on the walls of Queen Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari, depicts a flourishing and sophisticated kingdom. Yet, despite its clear importance to the Egyptians, the precise location of Punt has remained one of history's most enduring enigmas. Scholars have long debated its whereabouts, with theories pointing to the coast of modern-day Sudan, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, or even the Arabian Peninsula. While archaeology and textual analysis have provided clues, a definitive answer has been elusive. Now, the burgeoning field of genetics is being brought to bear on this ancient puzzle. By analyzing and comparing the DNA of modern populations across the Horn of Africa and southern Arabia, Scientists are engaging in a form of genetic triangulation, searching for a unique ancestral signature that could represent the people of Punt and finally pinpoint the location of this legendary land. The genetic quest for Punt is predicated on the understanding that the ancient trade between Egypt and Punt was not just an exchange of goods but would have inevitably involved the movement of people and, consequently, their genes. Egyptian envoys, sailors, and soldiers would have spent time in Punt, and Puntite delegations visited the pharaoh's court. This sustained contact over centuries would have left a discernible genetic footprint in the region. The primary search area for this genetic signal is the Horn of Africa and southern Arabia, a region that is already a known crossroads of human migration and admixture. The genomes of modern Ethiopians, Eritreans, Somalis, Djiboutians, and Yemenis are a complex tapestry of deep-rooted African lineages, primarily haplogroup E1b1b, and significant contributions from Eurasia, especially Y-chromosomal haplogroups J and T, and mitochondrial haplogroup M1. The key is to disentangle the timing and origin of these different genetic layers. Scientists are looking for specific genetic markers or patterns of admixture that are ancient and unique to one particular area, which could correspond to the population the Egyptians knew as the Puntites. One of the most promising avenues of research involves the Y-chromosomal haplogroup T. This lineage is relatively rare globally, but is found at its highest frequencies in a specific corridor encompassing the Horn of Africa and southern Arabia. Some researchers have hypothesized that this haplogroup's distribution may be linked to the ancient maritime trade networks of the Red Sea, including the routes to Punt. If a particularly ancient branch, subclade, of haplogroup T could be localized to a specific coastal region, it could serve as a powerful piece of evidence. Furthermore, the analysis of ancient DNA, ADNA, holds immense potential. In a landmark study, scientists successfully sequenced the genome of an ancient Egyptian baboon mummy. Since baboons are not native to Egypt, they were likely imported from Punt. By comparing the mummy's DNA to that of modern baboon populations, researchers traced its origin to a specific area in modern-day Eritrea, providing the first piece of hard biological evidence for the location of Punt. Extending this ADNA research to ancient human remains from the candidate regions could be transformative. If archaeologists could find burials dating to the time of the New Kingdom in coastal Eritrea or Somalia, and if the DNA from these individuals showed a unique genetic profile that also appeared in trace amounts in ancient Egyptian genomes from the same period, it would be the smoking gun that historians have been seeking for over a century. The Egyptian reliefs of the Puntites depict them as physically similar to the Egyptians, but with their own distinct style of dress and housing. This visual record aligns with the genetic picture of a closely related but distinct Northeast African population. The quest for Punt is therefore a perfect example of how genetics can be used to address historical questions that traditional methods alone cannot answer. It is a scientific expedition that mirrors the voyages of Hatshepsut's fleet, sailing through the vast sea of the human genome in search of a lost land. While the final destination has not yet been reached, the genetic charts are becoming clearer, guiding us ever closer to solving the mystery of Punt and restoring the people of this forgotten kingdom to their rightful place in the history of the ancient world. Stretching across the vast expanse of sub-Saharan Africa, from the highlands of Cameroon to the eastern shores of Kenya and down to the southern tip of the continent, resides a family of over 500 languages known as Bantu. The remarkable geographic spread of this linguistic group is the result of one of the most significant demographic events in human history: the Bantu expansion. This was not a single swift conquest, but a complex millennia-long process of migration, interaction, and settlement by agriculturalist, iron-using peoples that began around 3000 BCE. This odyssey fundamentally reshaped the continent's linguistic, cultural, and, most profoundly, its genetic landscape. The story of the Bantu expansion is a meta-narrative that underpins the history of numerous African kingdoms and societies, including Great Zimbabwe and the Kingdom of Congo. For centuries, this history was pieced together through comparative linguistics and archaeology. Today, population genetics is providing the most detailed and vivid account yet of this continental-scale movement, tracing the migratory paths, demographic impacts, and patterns of admixture through the DNA of modern African populations. This genetic odyssey reveals a shared ancestry for hundreds of millions of people, and offers a unifying biological framework for understanding the deep history of a vast portion of the African continent. The genetic trail of the Bantu expansion begins in a homeland region located around the border of modern-day Nigeria and Cameroon. It is here that the highest genetic diversity is found among Bantu-speaking groups, a classic sign of a population's point of origin. The primary genetic marker that has been used to track this expansion is the Y-chromosomal haplogroup E1b1a, which is carried by a vast majority of men in Bantu-speaking populations across the continent. The distribution of this haplogroup acts as a genetic breadcrumb trail, mapping the progress of the migrations. As these early Bantu-speaking farmers moved, first eastward into the Great Lakes region and then southward along the coasts and through the interior, they carried this genetic signature with them. This process is beautifully illustrated by what geneticists call a serial founder effect. With each successive migration to a new territory, a small founder group would break off from the main population. This small group would carry only a subset of the genetic diversity from its parent population. As this process repeated itself over thousands of kilometers and thousands of years, it created a distinct genetic gradient. Genetic diversity decreases steadily with distance from the West African homeland. This pattern is precisely what is observed in the DNA of modern Bantu-speaking populations, providing powerful, independent confirmation of the migration routes previously inferred from linguistics and archaeology. The Bantu expansion was not a movement into an empty land. The continent was already populated by diverse groups of hunter-gatherers, such as the ancestors of the modern Pygmy peoples of the Congo Basin and the Khoisan peoples of southern Africa. The interaction between the incoming Bantu farmers and these indigenous groups is a complex story written in their respective genomes. In many areas, the demographic success of the Bantu agriculturalists, whose farming techniques could support much higher population densities, led to the almost complete absorption or replacement of the local hunter-gatherer populations. This is reflected in the fact that many modern Bantu-speaking groups show only very small genetic contributions from these earlier inhabitants. However, the gene flow was not entirely one way. Mitochondrial DNA studies, which trace the maternal line, often show a higher proportion of pre-Bantu, indigenous lineages than the paternal Y chromosome does. This suggests a common pattern where Bantu-speaking men would arrive in a new area and intermarry with local women, who would then be assimilated into the Bantu-speaking agriculturalist society. This genetic narrative provides a nuanced view of the expansion, showing that it was a process of both demographic replacement and social integration. The legacy of this genetic odyssey is the profound interconnectedness of the peoples of sub-Saharan Africa. From the Shona builders of Great Zimbabwe to the Congo people of the Atlantic coast, their DNA tells a shared story of a common origin in West Africa. While centuries of local evolution, adaptation, and interaction with other groups have created a rich tapestry of distinct ethnic and cultural identities, the underlying genetic thread of the Bantu expansion unites them. It is a continental family history, a remarkable story of human ingenuity and mobility that transformed a continent and is now, for the first time, being read in its entirety from the living library of the human genome. For centuries, the story of Africa's past has largely been told by outsiders, by colonial administrators, European explorers, and foreign academics. These narratives were often distorted, colored by prejudice and a systematic denial of the continent's rich history of innovation, statecraft, and civilization. The great kingdoms of Nubia, Axum, Mali, and Great Zimbabwe were either ignored, downplayed, or, in the most egregious cases, attributed to non-African influences. In the 21st century, a quiet but profound revolution is underway, one that promises to restore Africa's history to its people. This revolution is being waged not with armies or political rhetoric, but with pipettes, sequencing machines, and supercomputers. The field of human population genetics, particularly the study of ancient and modern African DNA, is providing an entirely new and powerful toolkit for reconstructing the past. This scientific advancement, however, is not merely about accumulating new data. It is about reclaiming the narrative. Led by a new generation of African scientists and international collaborators working within an ethical framework, this research is empowering modern communities, validating long-held oral traditions, and writing a new, more accurate, and more nuanced history of the continent from the inside out. At the heart of this movement is a recognition of the ethical complexities surrounding genetic research in Africa. The continent's populations are the most genetically diverse on Earth, making them of immense interest to scientists studying human evolution and disease. However, this interest has sometimes led to helicopter science, where foreign researchers collect samples, publish their findings, and give little back to the communities involved. To counter this, major initiatives like the Human Heredity and Health in Africa, H3 Africa, consortium have been established. Funded by institutions like the NIH and the Wellcome Trust but led by African principal investigators, H3 Africa is building capacity for cutting-edge genomics research on African soil. This ensures that African scientists are leading the inquiry into their own genetic heritage, setting the research agenda, and ensuring that the benefits of the research, whether medical or historical, flow back to the continent. This African-led approach is crucial when interpreting the genetic history of ancient kingdoms. Genetics does not exist in a vacuum. It must be understood in the context of archaeology, linguistics, and, most importantly, the living traditions of the people themselves. By fostering collaborations between geneticists, historians, and local communities, researchers can ensure that scientific findings do not impose a new, rigid narrative, but instead enrich and add detail to the histories that communities have always told about themselves. For example, when genetic data confirms a link between the modern Shona people and the builders of Great Zimbabwe, it scientifically validates an identity and history that were actively suppressed under colonial rule. This provides a powerful tool for cultural affirmation and education, dismantling the colonial myths that have persisted for too long. Furthermore, advanced techniques like ancient DNA, ADNA, analysis are allowing for an unprecedentedly direct conversation with the past. By sequencing the genomes of individuals who lived in these ancient kingdoms, we can move beyond inference to direct observation. We can understand who they were, where they came from, their relationships to neighboring peoples, and their genetic connection to present-day populations. This technology allows the ancestors to speak for themselves through their biological code, providing a history that is unmediated by the biases of later chroniclers. The ultimate promise of this research is the construction of a comprehensive genetic atlas of African history, one that celebrates its complexity and diversity. It will show the continent not as a static backdrop for outside intervention, but as a dynamic theater of migration, innovation, and interaction. It will illuminate the deep roots of its peoples and the enduring legacies of its great civilizations. This is more than just an academic exercise. It is an act of historical restoration. By placing the tools of modern science into the hands of African researchers and communities, the study of genetics is helping to reclaim a story that was stolen, offering a powerful, data-driven narrative that honors the true depth and grandeur of Africa's past and empowers the identities of its future generations. This journey through our shared past shows that the legacy of Africa's great kingdoms is carried within the DNA of millions today. The story of humanity is one of connection, and science is now revealing its deepest chapters. What part was most surprising? Let me know your thoughts for improvements.